Hello there guys, Team Selector time ahead of the game against West Ham tomorrow night in the Premier League at Stamford Bridge. I feel this is quite a pressured game for Frank Lampard and Chelsea based off of the last two defeats, how momentum has been stalled, confidence has been drained, the pessimism around fans now, how quickly those two defeats changed the mood around Chelsea this season. And what I really want to see from Chelsea is a positive response. The nature of this Premier League season, it's so chaotic. You win a couple games, you're going to shoot up the table, especially if you're in sort of that top 7 or 8 club so far this season. But I just think isolating it down to Chelsea, we have to get back on track, because what we don't want is us to sort of fall back into our old ways over recent seasons of becoming an inconsistent side, and that drags us into the race for Champions League football, a scrap for it for the rest of the year. We don't want to be hauled into that once again. Chelsea need to improve this season, really show that we have improved. There's a lot more substance to this team, and I want a response tomorrow night. But it's going to be challenging against a very impressive West Ham side with some key threats that we'll get into, who have really made me look stupid based on my pre-season expectations. I think a lot of people predicted West Ham would be in a relegation fight this year, but they've done so much more under David Moyes. They're really impressive. They got some impressive results, good players who can hurt Chelsea tomorrow night, and there'll be confidence in the West Ham camp, I'm sure, against Chelsea under Frank Lampard, because they got maximum points from the 2 games last season. But let's get into team news. Frank Lampard confirming that both Hakim, ZIYECH and Callum are back in first team training. He was reserved in stating whether they would be in the matchday squad tomorrow night, so it's unsure whether either of these players will feature either off the bench or just be in the squad at all. I'm sure there's going to be caution over injured players at the moment. This very much ties into the REECE James story. I did a Let's Talk Chelsea earlier today speaking about that issue, Simon Johnson's piece for The Athletic. He does mention Hakim Ziyech and Callum Hudson-ODOI. He said it's more likely Hudson-ODOI is in the squad. Neither will be starting, and I think that's pretty much expected. But I think it's important that Lampard has one of the two on the bench as an option later on in the game to maybe change things up. That's what we've lacked, natural width within this team in the previous 2 games. Along with that, REECE James, it's hard to tell at the moment how serious this knee problem is. Will he be risked? Are Chelsea and Lampard going to be really cautious around it? I'll get into that in my team selector. It's a big thing for Chelsea, finding out about the extent of this injury. Fingers crossed it's not that serious, but it's big news. If REECE James is out, that's a key player going down in a key period of the season. Let's get into West Ham. This was their last starting 11. I think there's a natural sort of expectation from a Chelsea perspective to just look at Declan Rice, and that's the only player we focus on from a Chelsea perspective. But I think that'd be really disrespectful to West Ham. Rice is a brilliant player, and he's such a key part of this team. The balance within midfield, the protection, the mobility that Rice gives, and that's why Chelsea desperately want to sign him soon. But I also think Chelsea will know the threat of Souček, especially from set pieces, scoring against Chelsea, back in June in the defeat at West Ham. So that's a big player for me within the way West Ham play, especially height from set pieces. That is where they're going to look to capitalise. But it's not just about long ball and being physical. On top of that, they got some flair players up top. Jarrod Bowen, for me, is a really impressive talent. He's their top goal scorer so far this season. There's a variety to the way Bowen attacks. He scored some headers, so crosses into the box. He can definitely capitalise on that. He's got anticipation to get into the box, make those cutting runs. A bit like, I'm not saying, comparing the two players in terms of level of quality, but a bit like Christian Pulisic. I think Bowen, as he showed at Hull before moving to West Ham, does have an eye for a goal. He is a natural goal scorer, even if he is playing out on the right or the left. So that's a big player for me tomorrow. Chelsea have to shut down, especially coming down that left-hand side, and Chilwell will have that up against him tomorrow. And I also think, Said Benrahma, a player Chelsea were linked with over the summer as a potential wide option. I think that's a big signing for West Ham. Such a talented footballer, had an amazing season at Brentford last year and is now finding his feet in the first team at West Ham. I think, the issue Chelsea have is, you look at the way both Pedro Neto and Daniel Podence really hurt Chelsea and, changed the game against Wolves the other night to go into Wolves' favour, and we lost the game eventually, both in their talent, their speed, and also the creativity. I think that's going to be a similar issue that Chelsea have to deal with tomorrow. It's trying to shut down both Bowen, his goal-scoring instinct, and his mobility and pace in behind our defence, but also the creativity and flair of Said Benrahma. So similar issues, Chelsea have to confront that very smartly tomorrow to get the right result. And even Sebastian Haller scored an amazing overhead kick the other day for West Ham. So now he's found goal scoring form coming into the game against Chelsea. Key things for me going into this game is firstly game management. You know, Chelsea the other day when we went 1-0 up against Wolves, it was terrible. It really was. But even, you know, up to the point they equalised, I think it was actually for me, the drop was after they equalised. The lack of creativity, the lack of vision, the ideas just completely evaporated from our game, and we allowed Wolves back into the game, and the momentum went with them, and they deservedly got their winner in added time. The way we conceded that winner was absolutely terrible, overcommitting when we didn't need to. You know, a draw wouldn't have been the best result. You know, it would have been disappointing, but to leave yourself so exposed, it was so reminiscent of the goals we conceded, the stupid goals we conceded last year. So firstly, game management, but also on top of that, intensity, sharpness, and energy. I think those are the things we have lacked in the past 2 games. You could put it down to maybe fatigue over recent weeks, and maybe having this gap between the Wolves game and this one is going to help Chelsea. But there's just, you know, certain players who either look completely off form, and also just looking at they're lacking that sharpness. You know, you think about the intensity and the work rate of the Leeds game. That performance was incredible from Chelsea, outrunning Leeds and just absolutely battering them in all facets of the game. We want that Chelsea back. I know different teams, you know, the way you counteract Leeds is doing that. You have to be as intense as them in a game like that. But just generally this season, what I've loved about Chelsea is our sharpness in attack and on the ball. We haven't seen that in the previous 2 games. We need that back for Frank Lampard's team tomorrow night if we are to get a big result at Stamford Bridge. But let's go into my team. If Chelsea avoid defeat tomorrow night, they will better the points total against West Ham last season, of course, losing both times. I don't think a point is an amazing result for Chelsea, but just shows you how poor we were against the Hammers last season. Let's go into my team. Mendy in goal has disappointing few games, you know, keeping all those clean sheets at the start of his Chelsea career, has struggled in recent games. I don't think you can blame Edouard Mendy for any of the goals. I feel that, you know, most of them have been either, you know, the deflection for Podence's goal or just allowing a player free space to shoot at your goal, basically. Mendy has done a lot of things to improve that area for Chelsea, but it's big now we get a clean sheet on the board once again and hopefully start to rack those up again. Going into the back 4, I think Dave will start. I think just for me, it's safer to say Dave. It could be Reece James if he makes it through maybe a late fitness test or the scan comes back, it isn't that bad. Maybe he can play through it. Maybe the situation has improved. We don't know. But I'm going to go with Dave for now based on the reports we've got. Back to Zouma, Silva. Yes, they've had 2 challenging games. But once again, are you really going to change this centre-back pairing that's worked predominantly this season? I don't think you will. And I don't think you can pin the blame at either of those players recently. I know there was some concern over Kurt Zouma for the Neto goal, but as we saw last season, if your midfield just completely evaporates, it's really difficult for defenders to deal with those situations. You know, this year, we've seen the midfield really protect and shield that defence. Unfortunately, they didn't the other day, and it cost Chelsea big time in the final stages of the game. Obviously, Thiago Silva, Ben Chilwell did create Chelsea's first goal the other day and has the most assists for us in the Premier League. Creatively, he's a big player, but I felt defensively and just all round, I think he struggled in the past 2 games, so he needs to get back to a good level. For me, just all round, I think he's maybe dropped a little bit like some other Chelsea players. Going into midfield, I do think it's going to be Kante, Kovacic and Mason Mount. I feel Kova probably should have come on earlier against Wolves. I think I even predicted Kova to start against Wolves. I was a little bit stunned he didn't, and of course Kai Havertz had a really poor game. I just think Kova will go back into the team here. I know Frank has been very vocal in his support for Kai Havertz, which is what he needs to be, but I just think fairness, meritocracy, looking at the performance levels of both of these players recently, I think Kova will come back into the team. I think when Kova gets into this team, it's for me off the ball runs. I think that's the key thing to make that impact in the final third. I think about the Sheffield United game, you know, if West Ham defended a little bit deeper, the Sheffield United game, the equaliser that Tammy Abraham scored, it's those sort of runs that Kai can make that Kova needs to make a lot more, you know, to justify his place in the starting 11, you know, getting assists a little bit more, making those key passes in the final third. You know, that's going to be the thing. I know people on this channel, at least in the comments, doubt Kova. That's going to be the thing that tipped the scales and, you know, convinces Frank Lampard to keep him in the starting 11 consistently, because if Kai regains some form, you know, that's the area and that's sort of the position for me. It's going to be between Kai and Kova for that place. But for me, it's Kova tomorrow night. And Mason Mount has maybe dropped a little bit recently. He's played so much for Frank Lampard, but still for me, absolutely key to this team. We go into the front 3 now. Because of Callum Hudson-Odoi's fitness, because of Hakim Ziyech's fitness, I don't think there's going to be that drastic a difference to the front 3 tomorrow night. I did make a video the other day talking about Timo, Werner and Kai Havertz. I still think Werner will start tomorrow night just based on the options that Frank Lampard has at the moment. You know, I don't think he's going to throw Callum right back in there. For me, if Timo Werner does start, for me, he has to be on the right. Pretty much, this is what I'm going to say. Unless Timo's having a really good game and him and the other winger, obviously Christian Pulisic, can switch very quickly and very fluidly and they're both on their best form, for me, there should be no shifting of Christian Pulisic on the left, pretty much for me. You know, Christian now back in fitness. He looked sharp the other night, the best he has so far this season, really threatening. You want him on that left side. That's his natural position. That's where he's excelled for Chelsea so far in his career. And for me, if he's starting, he has to be there predominantly. Pulisic on the left, Werner on the right. And up front, I still think it's going to be Olivier Giroud. I don't think you can stop playing Giroud at the moment. He's scoring goals for Chelsea pretty consistently. His goal rate in recent games is really, really good. I can see the argument about Tammy Abraham, and I got a question about this that I'm going to answer in added time tomorrow about tactically the way Tammy really impressed against the likes of Sheffield United, Newcastle, in the way he's such a different forward in a sense that he has a lot more pace and pressing. I don't think Frank is going to drop a player who's in good goal scoring form. But that is my team selector, my starting lineup for tomorrow against West Ham. It's a big game for Chelsea before Christmas. Fingers crossed for a good performance and a big 3 points. Let me know your lineups in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.